On what seemed like a normal night shift, three panicked men jumped into his taxi, money bags in their hands, masks on their faces. "Drive!" they shouted. As Jimmy started the engine, the faded FBI tattoo on his arm became visible. "Where are we going, gentlemen?" he asked, as if it were the most normal question of his life. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if this story moves you, make sure you subscribe, because tomorrow I have something very special planned for you. 11:47 p.m. Downtown Chicago hummed with the kind of energy that never quite died, even on weeknights. Jimmy Rodriguez had been driving the same taxi routes for 3 years now, ever since he'd moved to the city looking for a quieter life than his previous career had provided. At 38, he found a certain peace in the predictable rhythm of night shift taxi work, airport runs, late dinner pickups, the occasional drunk who needed safe passage home. Jimmy's cab was nothing special. A yellow Crown Victoria with 180,000 miles on the odometer and a radio that only worked on AM stations. But he kept it meticulously maintained, checked the oil weekly, and knew every mechanical sound it made. Details mattered in his line of work, both past and present. Tonight had been typical. A businessman from O'Hare to the Loop, a young couple from a restaurant to their apartment, an elderly woman from her daughter's house back to her own. Simple fares, polite conversation, no complications. Jimmy preferred it that way. He was parked outside the Marriott, fourth in the taxi queue, when his radio crackled with a fare request. Unit 47, pick up at First National Bank Building, corner of LaSalle and Madison. Jimmy acknowledged the call and pulled out of the hotel queue. The pickup location struck him as odd. Banks didn't typically generate taxi fares at midnight, but his training had taught him to notice anomalies without jumping to conclusions. Sometimes the most innocent explanations were the correct ones. As he drove through the mostly empty downtown streets, Jimmy's eyes moved constantly, checking mirrors, scanning intersections, noting the positions of other vehicles. Old habits from his previous career that had become second nature. Most passengers never noticed the systematic way he observed their surroundings, but the skills that had once made him valuable to federal law enforcement now simply made him a very safe taxi driver. Jimmy pulled up to the designated corner at exactly 11:52 p.m. The First National Bank building loomed dark and imposing, its glass facade reflecting the sparse street lighting. He'd expected to see waiting passengers, but the sidewalk appeared empty. Then he heard running footsteps. 3 figures emerged from the shadows between buildings, moving fast and looking over their shoulders. In the dim light, Jimmy could see they wore dark clothing and what appeared to be ski masks. Each carried what looked like canvas bags, and their body language screamed panic and urgency. The first man yanked open the rear passenger door and dove in, followed immediately by his 2 companions. They were breathing hard, adrenaline clearly pumping through their systems. "Drive!" the first man shouted. "Now! Go, go, go!" Jimmy turned in his seat with the calm demeanor of someone who'd handled unexpected situations before. "Where are we going, gentlemen?" The question seemed to confuse them momentarily. In their adrenaline-fueled state, they'd apparently expected unquestioning compliance rather than professional customer service. "Just drive," the second man yelled. "Get us out of here." Jimmy started the engine with deliberate calm. "I understand you're in a hurry, but I need a destination. This is a taxi service, not a getaway car." As he spoke, Jimmy's left arm rested casually on the window ledge, revealing a small, faded tattoo just below his wrist. Most people would never notice it, but to trained law enforcement, the letters FBI, surrounded by a small eagle, were unmistakable. South. The first man finally said, "Head south on the interstate." Jimmy nodded and pulled away from the curb with practiced smoothness. His eyes moved to the rearview mirror, taking in details about his passengers that most taxi drivers would miss. Their clothing was dark but expensive. Their shoes were wrong for serious running, and the bags they carried had the distinctive shape and weight distribution of containers designed to hold large amounts of cash. "Busy night?" Jimmy asked conversationally, as if transporting panicked men in ski masks was routine. "Shut up and drive," the third man snapped. Jimmy adjusted his mirror slightly, ostensibly to get a better view of traffic, but actually to observe his passengers more clearly. The first man was checking a smartphone with shaking hands, the second kept looking out the rear window, and the third was counting something in one of the bags. "You gentlemen seem nervous," Jimmy observed. "First time in Chicago?" The casual question made all three men look at him with new attention. There was something in Jimmy's tone, too calm, too controlled, that didn't match their expectations of how a frightened taxi driver should behave. "What's it to you?" The first man asked suspiciously. Jimmy shrugged. "Just making conversation. Part of the service." But even as he spoke, Jimmy was conducting a tactical assessment that had become automatic after 12 years with the FBI. Three suspects, probably armed based on their confidence and aggression, carrying what appeared to be stolen cash, fleeing from the financial district at midnight. The timing and location suggested bank robbery, though he'd heard no sirens or alerts. His radio crackled softly with normal dispatcher chatter, but Jimmy's trained ear caught something else: increased police radio traffic in the background. The kind of urgent communication patterns that suggested a major crime in progress. "Turn right here," the first man commanded as they approached an intersection. Jimmy smoothly made the turn, but his route selection was deliberate. Instead of heading directly south as initially requested, he was guiding them through a path that would take them past 3 different police stations and 2 federal buildings. His passengers, focused on escape rather than navigation, hadn't noticed the subtle course corrections. "Faster," the second man said, his voice tight with stress. "We need to get out of the city." "Speed limit's 35 through here," Jimmy replied calmly. "Don't want to attract attention with a traffic stop." The logic was sound enough that even panicked criminals could appreciate it, but Jimmy's real reason was tactical. Maintaining normal speed gave him time to think, plan, and position himself for whatever came next. "How long you been driving taxi?" the third man asked suddenly. 3 years, Jimmy answered truthfully. "Before that, I worked for the government." "Doing what?" Jimmy met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "This and that. Mostly surveillance work." The word surveillance hit the 3 men like cold water. They exchanged glances that Jimmy caught in his mirror. Their paranoia suddenly focused on their driver rather than external threats. "What kind of surveillance?" the first man asked, his voice carrying new suspicion. "The kind where you learn to read people," Jimmy said simply. "For instance, right now I can tell you're wondering whether your taxi driver might be more than he appears." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Jimmy continued driving with the same calm professionalism, but the dynamic in the cab had shifted completely. "Pull over," the first man said suddenly. "Let us out here." Jimmy glanced around at their location, a well-lit intersection in front of a 24-hour convenience store with multiple security cameras. "Not the best place for privacy," he observed. "Just stop the car." Instead of stopping, Jimmy reached over and calmly locked all the doors. The electronic click was soft but definitive. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice taking on a different quality entirely, "we need to have conversation." The third man lunged forward, grabbing for Jimmy's shoulder. "Open these doors right now." Jimmy didn't flinch. 12 years FBI, he said matter-of-factly. "Specialized in vehicle surveillance and pursuit operations. I know exactly what you did tonight, and I know exactly where this is going to end." The words hit the 3 men like hammer blows. The first man's hand moved toward what was probably a concealed weapon, but Jimmy's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't recommend that. In about 2 minutes, we're going to arrive at our destination, and you're going to want your hands visible and empty." "What destination?" the second man asked, though his voice suggested he was beginning to suspect. "Chicago Police Department, District 18, Jimmy said calmly. 3 blocks away." The panic that erupted in the back seat was immediate and chaotic. All 3 men started shouting at once, demanding he stop the car, threatening violence, offering bribes. Jimmy continued driving with unflappable calm. The bank job was sloppy. He continued conversationally. "Silent alarm triggered, security footage captured, and you left DNA evidence on the counter. But the real mistake was getting into my taxi. You son of a..." The first man started, reaching for his weapon. "I wouldn't," Jimmy interrupted. "Look around." For the first time, the 3 men paid attention to their surroundings rather than their escape. They were traveling through a section of downtown where police presence was heavy, where federal buildings created natural choke points, where every intersection had traffic cameras. "You've been driving us in circles," the second man realized. "Not circles," Jimmy corrected. a very specific route designed to maximize law enforcement response time while giving you the illusion of escape. Standard pursuit protocol. His radio crackled, and for the first time, Jimmy answered it. Unit 47 to dispatch. Go ahead, 47. 3 passengers require immediate law enforcement assistance at my current location. Requesting police escort to District 18. The response was immediate. 47. Are you in distress? Negative, dispatch. Just transporting some gentlemen who need to discuss their evening activities with local authorities. Within 30 seconds, police sirens became audible in the distance. The 3 men in the back seat exchanged desperate looks, but they were trapped in a moving vehicle controlled by someone who knew the city's police response patterns better than they knew their own escape routes. How? The first man asked, his earlier aggression replaced by defeated confusion. Jimmy pulled smoothly to the curb in front of the District 18 station house. How what? How did you know we were bank robbers? Jimmy smiled for the first time since they'd gotten in his cab. I didn't initially, but 12 years of federal law enforcement teaches you to recognize patterns. 3 men in masks, carrying cash bags, fleeing the financial district at midnight? Either bank robbery or the world's most suspicious withdrawal. Police cars surrounded Jimmy's taxi within minutes, their approach coordinated and professional. Jimmy rolled down his window and displayed his hands clearly, identifying himself to the responding officers. Jimmy Rodriguez, former FBI, currently driving taxi. 3 passengers in custody require processing for suspected bank robbery. The lead officer, Sergeant Martinez, recognized Jimmy from previous encounters. The FBI didn't simply disappear when agents retired. They became valuable community resources when situations required their expertise. Jimmy, what V you got for us? 3 suspects, probably armed, carrying what appears to be stolen cash from tonight's first national job. They've been in my custody for approximately 8 minutes. The suspects were removed from the taxi with professional efficiency, their rights read, their evidence secured. Jimmy remained calm throughout the process, providing a clear statement of events that would be invaluable for prosecution. Rodriguez, Sergeant Martinez, said after the suspects had been transported, "You know we're going to need you to testify." Understood. I'll make myself available. Any chance you'd consider coming back to law enforcement? We could use someone with your skills. Jimmy looked at his battered taxi, then back at the police station where his former career had taught him the value of public service in all its forms. I'm good where I am, he said, but I'm always available when you need consultation. By 2:30 a.m., Jimmy was back in service, parked outside the Marriott as if the night had been nothing more than a quiet shift. To anyone watching, he was just another taxi driver killing time between fares. The truth, of course, was far stranger. The paperwork from tonight would take weeks to process. The trial, whenever it came, would demand statements, sworn testimony, and hours spent in courtrooms under buzzing fluorescent lights. But for now, his world was reduced to the hum of the meter, the faint smell of coffee in his cup holder, and the soft hiss of the heater fighting the late-night chill. His radio crackled with a pickup request. Late flight at O'Hare, standard run to the suburbs. Jimmy pressed the talk button, acknowledged the call, and eased the cab away from the curb. The tires rolled over the same downtown streets, where, barely an hour earlier, he had helped stop 3 armed criminals from disappearing into the night. The FBI tattoo on his wrist had faded to a ghost of its former sharpness, the ink worn down by years and sunlight. But the training behind it, that lived in him like muscle memory. Situational awareness, quick decision-making, controlled movements under pressure, skills that didn't vanish just because you turned your badge. They stayed quiet until the moment they were needed, and when that moment came, they returned without hesitation. Jimmy's phone buzzed with a text from Sergeant Martinez. Bank confirmed $127,000 recovered. 3 suspects charged. Outstanding work tonight. He allowed himself a small smile before deleting the message. Tomorrow, the story would hit the newspapers. The headlines would read something like, "Alert taxi driver helps capture bank robbers." But they'd get it wrong. They always did. They'd talk about luck, about a good Samaritan, maybe even about civic duty. They wouldn't mention surveillance patterns, the way Jimmy had predicted the suspect's escape route, or how his positioning had cut off their only exit before the squad cars closed in. And that was just fine. The best law enforcement work was rarely loud. It didn't come with medals or parades. It was quiet, methodical, and often performed by people who had learned to serve in whatever role life had handed them. Some retired agents found their peace on golf courses or fishing boats. Others, like Jimmy Rodriguez, became taxi drivers. Drivers who, if the situation demanded it, could still take the fastest route to justice. As the highway opened up before him, the lights of the city fading in the rearview mirror, Jimmy thought about the strange turns life could take. 3 years ago, he'd been sure his crime-fighting days were over. He'd traded briefing rooms for gas stations, arrest warrants for street maps, and tactical radios for a CB mic. But tonight had proven what he'd always suspected deep down. Some careers never truly end. They just change uniforms, change tools, sometimes even change vehicles. The runway lights of O'Hare came into view, and Jimmy tightened his grip on the steering wheel, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Not because the world would notice, but because he knew. And for men like Jimmy, that was more than enough. Have you ever discovered that someone in your community had skills they never talked about? Share your stories in the comments below, and let us know what city you're watching from today. If this story of quiet service and unexpected expertise resonated with you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And don't miss the 2 compelling stories appearing on your screen right now. Click and discover more tales of everyday heroes with extraordinary backgrounds. Because sometimes the most valuable protectors are the ones driving the cars we take for granted. See you in the next videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe.